What is going on, everybody? This is Andrew from DeFiancy. All right, guys, we're just going to jump straight into this per usual. Right now, we are looking at the S&P 500's futures contract, and we're getting a nice little response here from this economic data that just came in a few moments ago. And let's take a look at this data. So we had U.S. core retail sales actually come in worse than projected, so negative 0.6%. versus the forecast of 0.2%. We had the U.S. Empire State Manufacturing Index come in actually, I guess, better than expected, depending on what you think is better. And then I think the more important number here is really this U.S. unemployment claims that actually came in better than expected. So less people filed for employment than expected. So we can look at this in different ways because some people want to see this number higher. Some people would want to see it lower, depending on your investment strategy and your timeline for being in the markets. But overall, I don't really think this is important to talk about right now. I think a lot of these data points are really just distractions unless they come in way above target or way below expectations. So not target, but expectation. If they come in way below or way above, then they start to mean something. But if they're basically where they are now, although this number is kind of interesting here, they just don't mean a lot to me personally. I think it's better to really focus on the underlying denominator for the assets that I'm focusing on, which is global liquidity. Will these things affect global liquidity? No. Now, some people say, well, this is going to help the Fed, this is going to guide the Fed's decision making over the next few months. I just personally don't think this is going to change their minds whatsoever. The number that we get for this U.S. core or this U.S. PPI that's coming in tomorrow is probably more important. So we can talk about that tomorrow, but this is really just not important in my opinion right now. So let's look at this thing zoomed out here. So again, this is the futures contract. We are at roughly 5,030 right now, and we had a nice bounce from the CPI sell-off lows, which didn't really last that long. Look, you had a sell-off that lasted like 8 hours, and by the end of the session, you had already bounced, and then the next day, which was yesterday, ripped to the upside. So what is this market telling? It's telling us, and I've been saying this for a while now, that CPI is not the main focus anymore. I've realized that I probably shouldn't go into why CPI is not the main focus, because that's like a whole video. I could ramble about that for 30 minutes, but I just want to give you a quick summary. The reason why CPI is not the main focus is because 3% versus 2% is insignificant. It's just a made up number. Why they chose 2% versus 3%, nobody can give you a great answer for that. It's just what the Fed chose as the preferred level of inflation. So it's just this made up number. It isn't concrete. And to think that they would risk breaking the economy in an election year to go from 3% to 2% is just kind of ridiculous. Number two, the bigger variable that I think larger investors are paying attention to is global liquidity, and in relation to, let me step back. They're wanting to see how is the refinancing of global debt going to affect global liquidity, because it seems very obvious that the refinancing of the global debt, which is about 350 trillion, 60 to 70 trillion of that needs to be refinanced each year. The only way that is really possible is to increase central banks' balance sheets, which is creating money. Okay, so increasing the money supply, which causes monetary inflation. I think this is why Bitcoin and gold are going to do very well over the next few years. So that's really what I think investors are wanting. Anything that affects that matters a lot to this market. But these kinds of data points are just not going to move the needle in that respect, in my opinion. In terms of levels over the next few days, I'm just trading this thing, very conservatively. Like, I'm not holding on to positions. I'm scalping. Obviously, when you get these kind of pullbacks, you would have done well to buy these pullbacks. So I think you buy dips from a day trading perspective until it doesn't work. But obviously, if you look on the higher time frame, you're kind of due for a pullback. Things are getting overbought. But that's not a terrible place to be at. I mean, markets will be overbought for long stretches of time before they correct. So just because something's overbought does not mean that it's not a good trade to be in. In fact, oftentimes you want to be in an overbought market long. It almost doesn't make sense to focus too much on stocks when clearly the better opportunity over the next year or so is definitely going to be crypto, in my opinion. So I want to focus a little bit more on that. Not that stocks are not doing well right now; they're doing fantastic. Many of them are hitting all-time highs. I mean, obviously the indexes. But let's focus a little bit on crypto. So let's look at ETH here. ETH has now broken out of really this weird long consolidation that started in December. You had this nice rip up. You came all the way back down to range low, and now you've kind of securely, so to speak, broken out, for lack of a better word, or convincingly broke out. Let's just say that. Doesn't mean it can't come back into range, but I think people realize that the train has already really taken off. And this is obviously the case for Bitcoin as well. But the reason why I show ETH here is I just think it's a better opportunity. If you look at ETH BTC, it has had an absolute, destruction phase in terms of its valuation. You are roughly 40% from the highs, okay, on ETH BTC. And this means ETH versus Bitcoin. So Ethereum, the token Ether, is down 37.2% roughly versus Bitcoin from the highs. And this was set back in September of 2022, roughly, I think. Let me see. Yeah. That's not likely to continue, in my opinion. Now, it can make new lows, but the reason why I don't really think that is likely to continue is ETH just has more narrative going into the next couple years. It has a major upgrade that is going to be taking place over the next 3 months or so, I think, or maybe 4 months, I think at least by May or June. And it also has several narratives like eigenlayer restaking. It has these layer two roll-ups that are going to be getting quote unquote supercharged from this new upgrade. And it just has a lot of things built on top of it. And I think once you have investors look at, I've always thought this, or let me just say, I've thought this for a while now, that Bitcoin or ETH just has more potential than Bitcoin over the long haul. Now, I know a lot of people will disagree with me, but I think once people realize what Ethereum is, that it's a global economy, I think people will start to see it more valuable potentially than Bitcoin. Now, that's a very controversial statement because a lot of people think that won't happen because ETH has competitors and all this kind of stuff. And I realize I'm biased when it comes to Ether. And I love Bitcoin, but I truly think that Ether, the token, has a better economic model. The token has a better model. We can go into EIP 1559 and why that's the case, but I really just want to just keep this light, keep it kind of high level here for this video, and show you guys some other things. So I'm a big fan on ETH. I think it's going to outperform Bitcoin over the next couple of years, and fundamentally it makes sense to me. But really, I think apart from the fundamentals, it's going to have an ETF narrative that's likely to cause a lot of FOMO once people realize, oh, they missed the Bitcoin ETF pump. Well, ETH's the second best or whatever. It's down roughly 40% versus Bitcoin. It's logical that this is just going to start to outperform. And that's not a knock on Bitcoin. It's just ETH has really been suppressed. It hasn't done very well, as opposed to the rest of the crypto market. So really, really bullish on ETH going forward here. Not that it will go in a straight line versus Bitcoin, but just I think it's going to have better days versus Bitcoin and obviously versus the dollar. I want to show you a coin called Aptos, which if you don't know what Aptos is, it's a layer one that's sort of like Solana. It uses has a similar architecture in terms of how it's designed. Its smart contracts, I think, are written in Move or Rust, or maybe a combination of the two. And it's doing really well right now. So it's up about 10% today. It's had this nice accumulation structure here that took place, from end of December up until now. These are charts I like that have these nice consolidations. I'm not necessarily a fan on this from a fundamental standpoint. It has about 11, I'm not mistaken, it has a $11 billion fully diluted value, which means that maybe you could make a case that it's not that cheap. But from a chart perspective, from a narrative perspective, a lot of guys think that they should buy alternative layer ones because they typically outperform in certain parts of the cycle, like right now. I think it's a good trade. So, we added a little bit of exposure to this. Nothing major, but I think it could perform well over the next few months, or maybe even over the next couple of years. We'll see. I want to talk about another coin here that is a lot more interesting to me than Aptos. This is a very, very interesting project. It's called BitTensor. I guess that's how you pronounce it. The token is TAO, T-A-O. And this, to me, is really the most obvious AI crypto play. It's sort of it is at the intersection of AI and crypto. And we could talk more maybe in another video about really what this is, but just kind of think of it as a decentralized AI system. Okay, that's just like broadly speaking, like a decentralized AI system that has these built-in crypto incentive mechanisms. And it's like a crypto network of AI. I should probably explain it more, like I said, but that's just the best way to put it. And the reason why I think this is interesting is obviously AI is going to be super influential to our society over the next, maybe forever. But there's really not a lot of obvious AI plays within crypto. And I think that this is the most obvious, like I said, but also just like has the most demand probably. Like a decentralized AI is going to be very important for society. So from an ideological standpoint, I really like this. But I also think that people will FOMO into this just because it's kind of like a dog seeing a squirrel. Like, oh, AI? Oh yeah, I'm going to get in. Like, people aren't even going to read up on this. You're just going to see AI and they're just going to buy. I'm not saying that this is a great idea, not financial advice, but once we get into this AI, hype bubble, we are already in it. People will naturally they're not going to do a lot of homework. They're just going to see AI beside it and say, okay, well, I'll buy some. Okay, so it'll probably do well whether this is successful or not. But I'm actually interested in this because it's starting to get recognition from Web 2 AI projects that acknowledge that this is a very interesting project. And I just want to put it on people's radar. This is definitely a token that I will be adding for sure, adding some exposure to. Let's look at something else. What else do I want to show? So a lot of people have just forgotten about Uniswap. And we talk about DeFi. I mean, DeFi is really the most obvious use case for crypto right now. It is maybe the only real use case so far that people are actually using. You could make the case, obviously, that NFTs have a use case, but a lot more speculative there. How much value do they really bring to the table? Very clear that DeFi has value. People are transacting millions of dollars, or people are paying millions of dollars in fees a day to use the Uniswap protocol. We've talked about that in previous videos. And I love this chart. So you have this big decline from the highs of 2021, and now you've just been going sideways in this accumulation range. It just makes sense to me that Uniswap, although we can, a lot of people will argue whether governance tokens have value or not. Again, a lot of these, I would have to make another video to really go into why I believe they do. I guess I can give you a little summary. I think they do because if you want to control these protocols in the future, which I think there will be parties and maybe not even human parties that will want to be able to control them to some capacity, the only way you'll be able to do that is if you're a token holder. There's a lot of powerful human beings on the planet that would like to own a lot of Google and Facebook and other company stocks because they also have control to some extent over those companies. Well, it's the same thing here. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but I think that ultimately will be their obvious value case. Not to mention that in the future, who's to say that some of these governance tokens couldn't be used to vote on paying a dividend back to token holders, right? So it's a whole nother discussion, but Uniswap is it's an obvious mean, it's maybe the most used protocol in crypto. If you actually look at, we talk about, you know, this website, or I have showed you this website before, and look how much money people are paying to use this. Okay, so yesterday or over the last 24 hours, almost $2 million in fees were paid to use this protocol. That should tell you a lot, considering that is like close, you know, not necessarily close to Bitcoin, but at least on the 7-day average. So if you average out the last 7 days, it's actually higher than the fees that were generated on the entire Bitcoin network, right? So that is kind of crazy, right? Oh, this is just an application. It dominates the application layer in terms of fees. It hasn't really been talked about. No one is really excited about it. And that is the kind of opportunities I like to see. Things that have a really nice chart, that have obvious use case value, and nobody's talking about it, right? I think that's all we're going to talk about today. Until next time, happy hunting, friends.
Hey, thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel if you'd like more updates like this, and let us know in the comments, what do you think about today's video and DeFiancy update and insight? Also, make sure that you join our Discord, our free community chat, where we discuss things like this, what's going on in real time. Typically, our Discord community is the first to know what's happening, and we would love to see you there. Check the link in the description. And until then, we'll see you in the next DeFiancy Insight video. Bye for now.